I'm going to start with a quote. And this is a quote from the pioneers of speculative design, and it's something that I hold on to, and it says why speculative design is different from traditional futures thinking and policy making, for that matter. It's always about trying to pin the future down. This is something we're absolutely not interested in. In our view, it's a pointless activity. What we are interested in, though, is the idea of possible futures and using them as tools to better understand the present and discuss the kind of futures people want and, of course, the ones they don't want. So speculative design is the design of artifacts, objects, visual things that can help suggest possible and alternative futures. And they're usually deliberately ambiguous so that they can provoke debate about things that people want and don't want. And speculative design started a long way away from policy making. It started in design studios and in universities, the Royal College of Art in particular. And it's very different from traditional policy making that I've seen in my 13 years in government. Which traditional policy making tends to focus on single or certain visions of the future, or that's what the politicians want. It's created through written documents, often tracking changes as things whiz round, rather than anything visual or 3D. And policy making never really wants to create too much of a debate and media storm, otherwise you'll get a swift knock on the door from your minister. But in the last few years, government is starting to experiment with speculative design. And I think in the UK, along with the UAE's Museum of the Future, we were one of the first, if not the first, government in the world to use speculative design in policy making. I was in the government's policy lab at the time, and we were trying to think of ways to open up policy making to the public. At the same time, someone called Stephen Bennett was in the Government Office for Science, and they were trying to research the future of ageing. And I was also studying at LCC, London College of Communication, and someone called David Benke taught me a module on speculative design. So we had a problem, we needed to solve a method for opening up policy making and researching the future, and they all came together. So why is it so needed in policy making? For two reasons, I think. First of all, it opens up the space for new ideas and gets people excited. And actually, politics does do this. There's something called Overton's window, which people might have heard of, which is the range of what is acceptable in public discourse. And often, politicians will suggest slightly controversial, sensational things in order to open up that window of what is acceptable so that then people can accept the compromises which were much more unthinkable in the future. And I don't take credit for what I'm about to show you, but Georgina Voss from Strange Telemetry wonderfully uses this image to give an example of that. But speculative design also makes potential futures tangible in present. So at Uscreates, we're a social design agency for change. We did a project with EU policymakers who wanted us to come up with alternative visions for blockchain to actually show EU policymakers what blockchain was and how it could be used outside finance. So this is Florence. She's a blood transfusion drone that can take your blood from the comfort of your living room. And there were also ideas for how we could use this to automate, to give autonomy to machines and speed up delivery chains. Another project we did at Uscreates is this one where we were thinking about what could be the future of social care. So we imagined lots of different futures, one which is totally provided by the NHS, totally provided by communities, and totally provided by commercial high street organisations providing monitoring from your home. So it also, though, allows us to research people's responses to futures that don't yet exist. Quite often when we do user research in government, we understand things from people's current perspectives and they give us answers about what they need now. But that's no good when we need things to change. How can we understand what people are going to think in the future? We need to help them imagine what the future looks like and feels like, give them a real experience of that. So back to our Future of Ageing project then. So it's really difficult to imagine what our futures might be like in 10 to 15 years, but let alone our futures in 10 to 15 years, not in 2035, but in 2060. So we worked with Strange Telemetry to create a series of rendered photos which describe different types of features. This is a photo of a 24-hour robotics shop, Green and Sons and Sons. We also had a photo of a TaskRabbit-style allocation of various smaller jobs in the home, and another one of a fairly soulless shopping centre. And we took these to focus groups here in Swansea, the home of the call centre, and other ones around mobility in Leicester and public services in Manchester. And people were able to say what their hopes were and their fears were. All of these pictures were ambiguous, so they could there was no kind of absolutely preferred or absolutely hated feature. They talked about things about intrusion of their social life into work. They talked about the amount of reskilling that was required, things that they would need to do themselves, like say for their pension, but also things that government need to do, like the upskilling strategy that we've seen in the industrial strategy. And with the blockchain project, with Florence the drone, it also helps create a debate not about what could be, but what should be, the ethics of all of this. So when we created Florence, we gave her a smile, we made her out of felt, she played music, because we wanted to understand the experience of someone sticking a needle into your arm and then flying off with it out the window. So it fits, like for me, it fits into the progression in innovation and policy work anyway. It requires abductive reasoning for you to jump out to new solutions and then test your way back. It requires multidisciplinary teams to bring together scientists and artists and policymakers. And importantly, it requires physical things that people can look and touch and understand. So I'm going to take you through some top tips. It's not fantasy. Don't try, people have to be able to believe in it. They have to see it in their futures. This is a great example by Superflux Uninvited Guests, which is presenting remote monitoring in people's homes, but you can see that it's a fairly normal home, but the objects are in fluorescent. One of the issues with the Future of Ageing project that is what we created a scene in Manchester, and the respondent said, it's too sunny. This can't be Manchester now or in the future, so they just didn't believe it. It's also important to place it on proper research and bring in academics. So here it's another project we did on the future of rail, and we involved experts. We started with ethnography with real people, we brought in experts, we brought in the Royal Society of Engineering. So actually what we were making is credible. There has to be a possible path to potential futures. On ethics and expectations, it's really important to think about the ethics of this. We don't want to trick people. This is a nice example, though, for when they've created 99-cent objects in 99-cent stores and got people to actually place them in the stores and got people's actual responses. But when I tried to do that with the Future of Rail project, tried to take these speculations to train stations, it coincided at the same time with the Southern Rail crisis. And I got a very curt response from the comms director at the Department of Transport telling me this would not be happening. Consider how you talk to people about it. Speculative design, what on earth does that mean? What ifs can be much more effective. Visual design is a skill. You need to work with artists. They need to believe in it. This is a nice project from Stephen Bennett and other Central St Martin students bringing to life the future of research cultures. Another one from Lucy Kimball, creating wallpaper which shows pollutants and actually changes as the wallpaper gets more polluted. These things are art, these are visual, and that does take time and skill. The role of translator, quite often because you are working with artists, with scientists, with policymakers, you have to bring them together. They will all speak different languages. This was when we were creating Florence, the blockchain expert. We had our blockchain expert coding on his laptop. We had the ethics lawyer writing in Word loads of ethical principles. We had the CEO of a delivery chain organisation thinking what could be in his head. Everyone was talking separate languages, but when we made Florence, on the desk there, everyone was able to come round an object and we spoke the same language finally. So to end, not everyone is a scientific expert and not everyone is a visual designer, but everyone can imagine what ifs. And lots of you will be translating between two worlds, between science and arts and policy making, and between this world and a range of possible futures. Thank you.